And the first objective is about packaged boilers, shop assembled boilers, and field erected boilers, and explain what's the difference between them. Well, you certainly have experience with packaged boilers because every boiler in our lab, whether it's on the fourth floor or whether it's on the first floor, these are all packaged boilers. And when we start talking about a shop assembled boiler, it's a little bit bigger. It may in fact be, it may have certain discrete components that get their final assembly in the field, but certainly larger designs and more customizable. So here's your typical packaged boiler. This here looks to me like a Babcock and Wilcox design type FM. And so of the packaged water tube boilers, we've got 3 tube variations. So what letter of the alphabet applies to this particular tube variation?
This looks like a D.
It is a D type, yes. Okay, so what do we got going on here? You're going to go like this, and pen. And so here is where the burner goes. You've got flames in there. And so anything exposed to radiant heat is a riser. So these tubes here on that wall are risers, and these tubes here that are closest to the fire are risers. And then we also have, in addition to risers, we've got some downcomers. So these tubes here are not exposed to radiant heat, and they basically carry a single phase saturated water down to the mud drum. So from the mud drum, we've got this water goes this way and through the floor of the furnace and up through the risers on that wall, and then some of the water goes up and feeds these risers, and probably all of these tubes here. So you can see all these this cross section here. Those are all a cross section of the downcomers. Now this particular boiler, we can also talk about passes, but passes I think aren't super relevant when we start to talk about water tube boilers. I guess they are relevant, but they're not totally relevant. What we have is a whole bunch of tubes here that have got membranes between them. And so it's an impenetrable wall of tubes, right? Gas can't go through it. But toward the back end, the tubes don't have membranes. What that means is that the flue gas is forced to the back of the boiler, and now where there are no membranes, the flue gas can go through, and then we've got another bank of tubes that also have membranes. So the flue gas then goes this way through what's called the boiler bank. Boiler bank. And sometimes we call that the generating bank. And so these are a couple of terms that you should know. Generating bank equals boiler bank. And the generating bank or boiler bank is where we see a steam drum and a mud drum with this whole big nest of tubes in between. Okay, all that nest of tubes is called the boiler bank, or that whole nest of tubes is called the generating bank. Really depends who you're reading and when you're reading it. But it means the exact same thing, synonyms. So we had a membrane wall here, which was impenetrable, that act as a baffle. And it directs the flue gas. So that first pass is the length of the furnace. The second pass is through the boiler bank. And the last pass is this way and up here. So this part of the boiler where the flue gas is collected, and I'm going to use a different pen color. use black. Okay, so this part here where the ductwork connects, okay, this here is called the flue collar outlet. That's the real sort of special technical term for that. So that's the flue collar outlet. And that's where the boiler breaching and uptake are attached to. So ultimately that's going out to the chimney. So there's a D-type packaged water tube boiler. And that would be similar, I guess, to boiler number 4. This then is a shop assembled boiler. And you can see that this is considerably larger. So this particular shop assembled boiler, sorry, my pen fell, has this cyclone furnace, which is likely an option. Okay, do I want to burn coal? Do I want to burn coal that has got a low ash fusion temperature? Then what I would do is use something called a cyclone furnace, which is different from a natural gas burner or an oil burner, right? So a very big option. This particular boiler has got a superheater back here. Now maybe you could order this with a radiant and convection superheater, or maybe only a radiant superheater, or maybe only a convection superheater. Perhaps you can order this boiler with a reheat option. Maybe you can order this boiler with economizers. And so these are very large heat exchange components. So what we're talking about is a highly customizable, very large packaged boiler, if you want to call it that. I mean, it's not really packaged, but everything is made in components, and it's still reasonably small that it's fairly easy to transport. Okay, so highly customizable. And then the largest of all the boilers is the field-erected boiler. And though, so this is a fairly small field-erected boiler. But I think if I was to draw a Joe combustion engineer beside that, I think Joe would probably be about that tall beside that boiler. And I guess I got to start. I got to stop saying Joe combustion engineer, because we can also have Joanne combustion engineer. And back in my days of studying it, we had an instructor, and in a lot of these pictures of boilers, they will show, for the sake of scale, they'll show a little person beside the boiler, so you know how big the boiler is. And this particular instructor always called that little person Joe combustion engineer. So my apologies if you are not a Joe, maybe you are a Joanne. So a field erected boiler, here's what we got. We got a steam drum that's going to be made in the shop. And so it's going to be welded up, and it's going to get post-weld heat treatment in the factory. And then somewhere down here, where you can't see it, there's going to be a mud drum. Same type of deal. It's going to be built in the factory. And then here's the superheater, and the superheater will be built in the factory. And then you'll have panels. So you got a water wall here. And that water wall will be built in the factory. Same with the sidewalls. And the bottom line is, now they're going to take all of these components, because they are so large, they have to actually build this sucker in the field. And that may involve field welding. Certainly it's going to involve installing every single one of the tubes, and there can be hundreds upon hundreds of tubes in the boiler bank, and each one has to be rolled and expanded into place. You may have downcomers. You may have headers that require welding. So all of the welding is done in the field. So that's what's meant by field erected. I mean, it's assembled in the field. And if you've got English as a second or a third language, I don't really know what other word I can use beside field to make the point. It's like on site. They can't fabricate the whole thing inside of the of the manufacturing facility because some of these boilers are easily 10 stories tall. Now, can you imagine if you have to erect one of these things in the field? Maybe they're building it in December or January. I mean, it could take several, well, maybe 1 year to construct. So if it's going to take a year to construct, maybe they start in December of 2019 and it's finished in December 2020. That means that these people are working in the wintertime. They're working in the rain. They're working in the snow. They're working on windy days. They're working on calm days. They're working under the heat of the sun in the summertime. And so all of these are factors that are going to affect the quality of the welds, the quality of the erection, the quality of the construction, basically. Now, that does not mean that these are poor quality boilers. What it means is the skill of the boiler makers who make these things, who assemble them on site. Tremendously skilled, tremendously capable, tremendously competent people. I taught the Boilermakers for a year back in Winnipeg, and kind of crazy, but I got to tell you, like even in terms of welding capabilities, when we get to boiler construction, we'll talk a little bit about some of the things the Boilermakers have to do while erecting a field-erected boiler, and it'll hammer home what incredible welders they are, what incredible metal fabricators they are. They're basically highly, highly skilled people. So they're built by Boilermakers. And with that, I'm going to leave you for the day. I think it was a good little introduction, little start to the boilers.